You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 7th of November. BNP driver cleared by the EU courts. Another Lancashire Police cock-up finally fixed. Asian rapists are getting younger. French business relief in sight. French socialists attempt to desecrate the Christian church. Britain to train future Muslim enemy soldiers out of our pockets. More innocents killed by Tony Blair's war. Thought for the day, are we too late? And finally it went with a great big bang. UK news. A bus driver from Bradford should not have been dismissed for being a member of the British National Party, the European Court of Human Rights has ruled. Sacking BNP councillor Arthur Redfern from his job transporting disabled passengers, many of whom were of Asian descent, breached his rights to his freedom of association, the Strasbourg court declared. The judgment said in a healthy, democratic and pluralistic society, the right to freedom of association must apply not only to people or associations whose views are favourably received or regarded as inoffensive, but also to those whose views offend, shock or disturb. The judgment on Mr Redfern, who was sacked in 2004 by his employer Serco, stated, prior to his political affiliation becoming public knowledge, no complaints have been made against him by service users or by his colleagues. Pakistani-born Mohammed Shah Nawaz-Cheema, an illegal immigrant, raped a young Burnley, Lancashire woman in November 2009. The former takeaway worker and assistant sales manager for Sky TV was given a 2-year sentence by Burnley Crown Court. Following his arrest on suspicion of rape in 2009, he was released on bail and immediately fled the country. He disappeared from Britain by escaping back through the Channel Tunnel, fleeing first to Pakistan and then to Spain, where he later gave himself up to police and was arrested in May this year. It is claimed he will be deported at the end of his sentence. It is a sad indictment of the British criminal justice system, and especially the Lancashire Police, that a suspected rapist's immigration status was not verified before he was given bail and allowed to flee the country. It is highly unlikely that he will be deported. After all, according to newspaper reports, he is hard-working, had to flee his native Pakistan because he witnessed a police murder, and oh yes, best of all, his family had to flee Pakistan as well. His human rights will trump those of his victim and decent British society. An Asian teenager sexually assaulted a young woman in Rochdale's Manchester Road area. The 21-year-old victim was walking through a subway near the Asda superstore when the attacker, said to be around 14 years old, grabbed her. He was about 5'3" tall and medium built. He is said to have followed the young woman from the bus station. She was left shaken after the ordeal, in which she fought for her life and her dignity. All decent British citizens should contact the Rochdale Police and demand they do more than their Burnley cousins to ensure this rapist is brought to justice. Oh yes, the BBC describes the attacker as Asian looking, when the victim describes him as an Asian teenager. A World at 8 reporter stated, Asian looking can encompass anything from the Middle East to China, as usual deliberately skirting the issue of race when it comes to black on white crime. European news. French President François Hollande has offered businesses in France a little relief. 20 billion euros of relief. Hollande said yesterday that he will give all French businesses the tax relief, only after months and months of French businesses crying out for help. The French want their country to recover in industry due to its appalling financial involvements with the EU, like every other country. Meanwhile, Germany has refused any full financial help to the sinking countries in any full bailout agreements this week. The French socialists in power are attacking the church with its gay marriage blasphemy. The previous French Prime Minister François Fillon added that if he regained power he would reverse the blasphemy brought on by the Socialists. The Socialists' main aim is not to give homosexuals the chance to marry in the house of God, but to attack Christian values and bring down Christianity for its communist cause of attacking family values for its perverted agenda. Voting in Greece is underway over the new austerity programme. Although the outcome is uncertain, one thing is for sure, the Greeks will still be deeper in the red than before the vote. World news. Britain is starting a programme to train Muslim fighters against Syria's President Assad. The aim is to topple Assad and place a puppet leader, just like in the other Arab countries, with revolutionary ideas. The training, which will be paid for using British taxpayers' money and our armed forces, further deepens Britain's involvement in the Syrian conflict. One nationalist spokesperson commented, "Once again, British troops have to do the dirty work for a dirty government." The failure of the Labour Party's intervention for the invasion of Iraq, purely for its oil, is proven beyond doubt to be a total disaster. The families of 31 people killed yesterday have Tony Blair to thank for the deaths of their loved ones. Baghdad was the scene of renewed horror as a rebel car bomb strewed body parts across a wide area outside a military base. The suicide attack on the base happened as the guards were changing. Thought for the day. Are we too late? Now, I'm not being depressing here, just factual. Are the British population just too ignorant of what is going on within the establishment? We have two powerful points of propaganda directed at us, one from the television and one from the papers. Now, I'm not including the more subtle forms of indoctrination that we, the Brits, have been subject to for around 50 years. Those are education and forms of authority like the police force, all of which are riddled by the stench of common purpose. Children believe their teachers. The average person has been brought up with a healthy respect for the police. Now, neither of these previously lauded occupations deserve anything but scorn. Successive governments have worn away the family values most of my generation were brought up with, and I use the word brought up deliberately. I had a good childhood, I was lucky, but there were girls much luckier than me and many more much worse off. It was accepted in the 60s that if you did not have the advantage of parents who could afford education or sacrificed for it, you would have a hard struggle to reach the top, but at least you did not have to compete with a system that held you back and promoted newcomers in your stead. You knew that if you got a job, it would be for life if you wanted it. Things were not rosier in hindsight, but on a practical level most people had different aspirations, and the only people we had to look out for were those of our own tribe and our own culture. Now I feel very sorry for the youth of our country. They have been indoctrinated for the most part with either a form of well-bred liberality towards all or a streetwise acceptance of their fate. The better educated raft of chinless wonders really do accept and encourage a multicultural society because they usually live well away from the areas that have a large immigrant population. The lesser educated live in those areas, and it is difficult to resent and dislike people of different cultures if you're living right next door to them. That is why most soaps and reality shows on TV are directed at this section of society. It is to make them feel it's okay to have umpteen multicoloured infants, to give blowjobs to Pakistani shopkeepers and buy drugs to keep the drug culture flourishing. If you live in those areas you must actually want to be homosexual, otherwise you do not fit into the norm. You have to put up with yet another pub closing because you can buy lots of booze from a local owned Asian store and probably drugs as well. You can see the not so subtle alterations in our capital city, London. Spot the whiteface is not a game anymore. It has reached desperate proportions of trying to find any resemblance to the London of even 20 years ago. It is simply lost. That is what successive governments have planned. Firstly, to get the most immigrants they can to settle in London so that the voting is covered. Then the not so subtle propaganda is released for many years through the television, which generations of Brits have watched for many, many years. And here the message has always been, very softly but surely, black is good, white is bad. Any country that appears to sort itself out is carrying out ethnic cleansing. This country is available to all newcomers, sick or old or useless, it doesn't matter. It is our duty to look after them. The blacks because of slavery, and the Indians because of our colonial days, and Africans a bit of both. Now where the Filipinos, Thais or Chinese come in here, plus the many other ethnics we are supposed to cosset and pay for, there's no explanation for them, except under the guidelines of asylum seekers. As to the huge waves of Muslim immigrants with their arranged marriages and the inability to travel to a new land without the entire bloody tribe and their women with bellyfuls of arms and legs, rational thinking leaves me. But this propaganda has worked, in its awful simplicity, rather like communism. We, the simpletons of this country, actually believe that people care for the underdog. That is why the facts and figures of the true numbers of immigrants already over here has never been given out. The excuse of illegals vanishing and paperwork not being filled in is verging on the ridiculous. These people do not want to be traced. They vanish into the melting pot of their own cultures, and most cannot read or write anyway in their own language, let alone English. This is why huge amounts of money are paid by us for translators when a few make it to court for their crime. Under Blair, even his wife, the truly awful Cherie, made up her mind to capitalise on these immigrants by starting a firm called Matrix, which, like the film after which it is named, believes in mind control and raking in the lolly by taking on immigrants who have committed crimes or who are simply illegal, and by virtue of legal aid they are now worth a small or rather large fortune. Immigration is good for the so-called university class in Labour. Now the press is not our friend and is multi-faced. In one breath they report on some of the awfulness that massive immigration brings to our country and its people, for example luxury housing giving to people who live in mud huts in their own land, free expensive medicines and education for their brats. Then in the next page they condemn the British National Party for telling the truth. One of the truths I learned was that the soldier killed in Cyprus was not killed by British men, but by two Muslims and a Somali, who were usually Muslim as well. They were described in the papers and the news as Brits. All lies. Thank you, former Samba, for that one. How long will the press and TV cover up or simply not report the true facts of certain cases? Why are they protecting the mainly Muslim contingent in their awfulness? What hurts me most is the way in which our entire social structure and culture has been changed, and in some way we are all to blame for allowing it to happen. We've watched the destruction of our industries, our education system and our healthcare, all to fit in with the new world order, which is in fact an old world order. Wars and chaos have been around a very long time, as has well-directed propaganda to the masses. It happened in Rome with the acceptance of the state for newcomers, and the Roman masses were subjugated with the games, although it took longer than 30 years with them. Why do successive governments want to replace their own cultures with a third world culture? Why do they want to make their people deliberately unhappy and poverty-stricken? Why do they want several generations of uneducated and uneducatable youngsters on the streets? Why do they want to elevate strangers and decimate their own? Why do they want their own farmers and fishermen to suffer loss and hardship? Why do they want edifices of another alien culture in all towns and cities? Why do they destroy the family unit and encourage unnatural alliances? Why do they discourage British religions? Why do they promote alien festivities and culture to our young? Why do they demolish our armed forces and yet still send them abroad to die? Why is abortion encouraged and promoted? I will tell you, my friends, because a country divided and weak, a country without a standing army, a country without its own educated class, a country without industrial capacity, a country without the means to feed itself, a country without its own culture and identity, A country without leaders is not a country at all. It is a cipher, a mismatch and a dwelling place for strangers who have no allegiance to our country. This can and will change. It will change abruptly and it will change violently. Our Jerusalem will be built, even though we do not have any dark satanic mills anymore. And finally, Edinburgh firework display goes spectacularly wrong when the spectators at a community firework display in Oxgang, Scotland were sent in all directions running for cover when boxes of the fireworks, or pyrotechnics as they are now called, all went off at once. The accident happened when a banger bounced off a climbing frame at the Pentland Community Centre in Edinburgh and landed in a box of unexploded rockets. Police and Red Cross representatives attended to spectators, but no one was injured. In 2011, a similar fate beset another firework display in Scotland when a 20-minute show in Oban was reduced to just 50 seconds after a technical error set them all off together. Now, I've just viewed the video and it was marvellous. People running in all directions and a wonderful display of simultaneous combustion. Call me petty, but do the Scots really want cessation? Those fireworks must have cost a fortune. What a waste of money. The only people to gain were the Chinese makers and the Asian shopkeepers. What happened to Brock's fireworks then? Not good enough. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.